Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Anthony.
Today, why don't we talk about how to podcast in New York or actually in any other big city? Yeah.
Yes.
So I wrote this up, and we're talking about this today because I had a friend, or I've had several friends actually. Podcasting is getting big, and a lot of folks are looking to get into it. So I've had a lot of questions about my exact setup. So I'm here to, instead of answering the same question several times, I thought I'd just record this and circulate the link. Yeah, does that make sense?
Great idea, because I want to know how you do it. I know we always end up with this great finished product, but there's a lot of work that goes into it.
So I want to just start off by being clear that this is not, I don't think there's any perfect setup for everyone. So I want to first sort of lay down the parameters that were important to me and my personal situation so that you understand where I'm coming from when I describe why I set it up the way I did, right? For other folks, there might be other optimal solutions, if that makes sense. All right. Okay, Jay. So first, let's talk about what are some of the issues about doing this in New York or any big city that are unique compared to doing it in the burbs, okay?
Right.
So first, it's just a lot noisier here in Manhattan and probably a lot of other cities. I mean, I'm talking about even from your neighbors. If you're in an apartment, you have noise sometimes through the walls or from the hallways, but more generally, honking taxis. And
you have a lot of fire trucks and EMS trucks, right?
Exactly.
All day, I hear them. Right.
Very good, very good. Well, I'm glad that even if you hear them, they hopefully don't leak into the audio of our podcast too much, right? And we'll talk about that in a moment.
They don't. It's actually pretty good.
Also, space is an issue. I mean, just generally, when you choose to live in a city versus the burbs or rural, you're sacrificing space for proximity to urban centers. I mean, that's just generally what's going on there, yeah?
Right.
So that translates into, the solutions that you need to find need to be compact, and you can't clunk up your house with all sorts of audio equipment. Otherwise, your wife will be really annoyed with you, like mine does sometimes.
Speaking from experience, or just in general, right? Is that
a little bit of A, a little bit of B?
right? And when you said about the big city and the loud noises, I do think it also applies to the burbs. For example, I have an active train outside of my window.
There you go.
So between 60 and 70 times a day, we have a train horn.
Very good. So this is not just about city versus suburb. This is about if you have these issues that are more common in cities, then take a listen to what we have to say. Also, tighter budgets. I mean, when you choose to live in the city, you're often have a higher cost of living from pulling at you from every direction. So if you're going to start podcasting either as a hobby or even as your side business, you want to, just like anything else, keep your expenses as low as possible. So, a lot of the solutions I talk about are from a cost effectiveness point of view.
I like that.
So Janice, I appreciate that you said before that our sound quality ends up pretty good. I've generally taken what I like to call the good enough approach. I'm sure that if a true audiophile came in and listened to our finished audio, they would have tons of criticisms or things they would tweak on, like, this sound is not rich enough, or this sound could use more. I don't even know what words to use, but
I don't even know the words. Let alone, yes, I'm sure someone could come in and make it really, they could dissect it.
Yeah, but I'd say to 80% of the population, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
When I listen to our stuff versus something that's more professionally finished, I could tell theirs is a little bit better. But honestly, to my untrained ear, it sounds kind of the same. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for here. Yeah.
Right, and we're human too. You're going to have that human factor of the bumps along the way and hiccups and and the sound might not be perfect sometimes, but.
Very good. So with that background in mind, we're going to run down an idea to a published podcast. Number 1, the microphone. Number 2, the recording software. Number 3, I don't even know what the real word is. I called it post-production, but how you sort of polish or edit the recorded file.
Yeah. When you put it all together.
Yep, and then lastly, how you host it, which means publishing it so that it actually shows up on iTunes or... Janice, what do you use to listen to podcasts, if at all?
So I don't. I would go through iTunes typically because I have an iPhone. Yeah. Most of them I get on Facebook. the Facebook feeds. I know that's how I listen to ours.
Very good. Cool. That actually ties into something, to that topic when we get down there. Cool. All right. So for microphones, if you started your journey and said, hey, I want to start a podcast, and you start Googling or YouTubing and looking it up, you'll see a lot of advice telling you to buy a condenser microphone. And two of the more popular ones are I think they're called a Blue Yeti and a Blue Snowball microphone. So Janice, the reason you might not want to use one of those is because they are super sensitive.
Pick up all that noise.
They will pick up the clink of your earrings, right?
Wow.
They will pick up the squeak of your chair if you're seated. They will pick up the rustle of your clothes. And in some ways, having a super sensitive mic brings you to another level of professionalism, right? Because it'll give you a better sound.
Sure.
But if you're not in control of your background noise, if there's a crazy guy outside, yelling, you can't control that, and you don't.
And as you're saying that, I'm thinking of all the things that I'm like, wow, my stomach's growling, and I've just dropped my coffee cup, and my chair is squeaking, and then I'm thinking of all the things I'd have to fix to. Yeah. Yeah. No.
So what I recommend instead is what's called a dynamic microphone. And I don't want to get into all the technical details. I probably wouldn't be able to adequately explain the details. But the dynamic microphone is the handheld mic with the mesh ball at the top, the type you think of when you think of school general assemblies kind of microphones. And the reason these are good is because if you imagine sort of an imaginary balloon around the head of the microphone, or even an ellipse, that is the only area where it'll pick up sound, theoretically, right? So unless I'm speaking directly into the mic, and if you're watching on the video, you can see that I'm speaking directly into the mic, and I'll give you an example. If I speak away from it, did you notice a difference there?
I'm like, wait, where'd he go?
Yeah. So it's really, the sound is really tightly confined to this imaginary bubble right around the mic. So that's a great solution for cities or any area that has hard to control background noise. And I think we have a sample of that going on right now. Do you hear that, Janice?
Do you hear the dog barking?
Yeah. For anyone saying, what kind of advice is this? It's picking up the dog. That's on Janice's side. She does not have a dynamic mic.
I don't have a fancy mic, but I should get one. So I've got the dog barking. The train has now gone by twice since I said about the train.
So anyone who's saying, what is this guy talking about? I hear all the background noise. That is Janice's side, not mine.
That's right. This is the suburbs. This is what we're dealing with in the suburbs today. It's not quiet. It's actually very loud.
Meanwhile, I'm going
to go into the closet here and shut the door.
So meanwhile, Jeez. I'm in the city with construction going on across the street, noisy cabs and trucks rolling by. And if I understand correctly, you're not picking up any of that. So that's the beauty of the dynamic mic. Yeah.
So this is a good example of like the contrasting of the microphones. Is mine picks up everything from outside, from a mile away, and yours, when you have this, it sounds great.
Oh, so the mic that I'm using is the ATR 2100. I think it's Astro Technica 2100. There's a link. I'll put a link in the show description. So what's so good about this mic is it also has a USB connection, which means everyone.
That's great.
Yeah, I think everyone knows what USB is. Yeah, that's just your computer connection.
Is it plug and play? You plug it in.
It is plug and play. So a lot of other mics.
Perfect. Yeah,
they use the more technical XLR connection. Do you know what that is, Janice?
I have no idea.
Yeah, most people don't. And why would you want to spend the time learning that, right?
Not really. And then you sounds like you'd have to get some sort of converter to put it into your computer, and that sounds really complicated. Yeah, a lot of mics require their own power source, so the mic would have to be plugged into the wall, and it would need there's an ambulance going by, pretty loud. That's the first I've heard in a long time in our podcast, so it must be pretty close. Yeah, that one is it's actually distracting me from the conversation. That's how loud it is. Anyway, so moving on. Look, squirrel. So, a lot of professional mics require something called a preamp or pre-rig. I'm probably getting those terms wrong, but the bottom line is you would need to buy another piece of equipment to plug the mic into your computer. And that ties into extra money, extra clunky stuff. So, yes, this mic, the ATR 2100, plugs USB into your computer, no other power source, no other junk, and you're good to go. So that's why I recommend this one. Yeah. Other thing, you just mentioned, you might have to set up your own,
recording space in your walk-in closet or a separate room. Yeah, if you live in Manhattan, man, not a lot of us have walking. Yeah, not really.
Do you have that?
Yeah. So the whole idea of setting up your own, because people do that. They buy a little bit of foam from Michaels or whatever, Walmart, and they set up a little room for themselves to record and dampen the sound. Just I don't have space for that. A lot of people don't. Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
that's
cool.
funny.
Let's move on to the recording software. I like to keep it real simple. I don't want to have to learn something new. I want to focus on this, talking with you, Janice, coming up with good topics that hopefully people are interested in. So if it was a solo podcast where I'm just speaking by myself, sort of monologuing, I would just use whatever's on my laptop or my phone. I would use QuickTime on my Mac or the voice memo app on my iPhone. But because you and I do this interview style or conversation style podcast, I use Skype, which of course is free. And I did pay for a piece of software called Ecamm Call Recorder, which is, I think, $50. I don't remember what I paid for it. It's listed in the show notes. But the reason why you want to use that is because it records Janice's voice and my voice as two separate tracks. And the reason that's so important is because later, and we'll talk about this in the next step, it allows the software to level our voices. So Janice, have you ever heard an interview or a podcast where one speaker's voice is like really loud and the other speaker's voice is really... Yeah, I think that's called, mismatched or poor leveling. And that's really hard to listen to you. Do you agree?
It is. And I'm glad that you do that, because I know you and I, before you go through this process, if you were to hear our raw recording, sometimes I get louder, sometimes you get quieter. And I know that you level that.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the recording apps. And now you mentioned that the leveling. So let's jump into the editing process after the fact. So there's two ways that I like to go about it. Again, I like to keep it inexpensive and I like to keep it simple. I used to use Fiverr, which is an online marketplace for freelancers across the world. So I used to pay a gentleman in Eastern Europe who did it very, very inexpensively. He would level every episode for, I think, $5. Very cheap.
Wow.
But if you don't want to even pay $5, there's an alternative solution. It's called Auphonic, Auphonic, I think. It's a German, web-based software. It's free for up to 2 hours per month. And I think I paid $10 or $5 for 10 hours a month. And, I don't think we do 10 hours worth of podcasting per month.
Don't think so.
But yeah, I upload my side of the conversation, and then I upload Janice's side of the conversation. It detects, and I literally press one button. Uploading files, I think we all know how to do that from Facebook or whatever.
Right.
And then after I upload, I just press one button. I'm sure there's other settings I could fidget with, but I don't. I just press one button, and it auto levels, and it spits out an MP3 or some kind of audio file where Janice and our voices are now in sync and reasonably within the same volume range. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. I mean, that you can do that.
Yeah, I was so happy to find that because it's even cheaper than the freelancer, but it's also easier because with the freelancer, you send the file, you have to wait 3 days, you get it back. With the Auphonic software, I upload and I'm done in like 5 minutes. So that's cool too.
That's great. Yeah. Because you got to think of what else you could be doing during that time. Time is money when you're working.
Very good. And lastly is hosting and publishing. You have to put your podcast episodes somewhere on the cloud, I guess they would say, or on servers.
Yeah.
So that they're served up to iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever, and we're on all of those things. And even, yes, like you said, Facebook and the social outlets. So I'm going to make this one real easy. Just use Libsyn, LIBSYN.com. It's kind of like the OG of podcast hosting. They've been around forever. They're really good at what they do. The only drawback, and they're priced similarly or competitively to everyone else. I think I pay $10 a month, but I started off at $5 a month before I started producing more. But the only drawback is their interface is really ugly. It looks like something from the late 90s, I would say. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it took a little while of getting used to it, but once you're used to that sort of ugliness, everything that it's supposed to do, it does well. There's sort of no complaints in the functionality. And I did try a different one. I think it was called Buzzsprout. They all have these, kitschy names.
Yeah.
And it worked all right, but there was one thing that didn't work well that I needed, embedding in my website. And they were super nice. Their customer support was really cool, but they did acknowledge, hey, this functionality is not working, and I had to move. So their stuff looked better, but Libsyn, I would say, sort of does everything better. I hate to criticize anyone, but
Okay.
that's kind of was.
Well,
yeah.
but it worked for you, and like you said, even though it didn't look pretty, it worked.
Yeah.
And you'll find that some things work for you and some things don't.
So that's all I have. I hope my friends who are interested in podcasting and anyone else who's interested in podcasting finds this useful. Janice, what did you think? Did you get any good information from this?
I did, because it's one of those things where I'm like the lucky one. I just get to talk and then I'm done, and magically this podcast appears and we sound pretty good. So it is interesting to see that there is a lot of behind the scenes. And I also think a lot of people don't know we are not in the same room. We're not even in the same state. And it sounds like we are sitting next to each other, having coffee and talking. So to have that final product is actually pretty cool. And it's very interesting how you got there.
Cool. All right. So hopefully I explained that easily enough. And if this one is interesting, I know this is in our usual wheelhouse of estates and real estate. But if this is interesting, I'm happy to talk about more about how I self-publish my book. Just let me know in the comments or on social. Otherwise, talk to you later. Janice, thanks a lot, and talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
Bye now.